To be an architect my whole life, basically, and I've loved to build since I was a kid. Instead of Christmas presents, I asked for a hammer and saw and nails to work with. That's all I wanted from when I was 4 years old. So, all I had was a tractor, the sweat of my brow, and whatever labor I could put into it. And I ran around the neighborhood collecting old bricks and parts of buildings and doing whatever I could collect. And built this first building, the tavern, out of old parts. And then people started asking me if I wanted old buildings around the neighborhood. So I ended up starting to drag them home with a tractor and a trailer on the back of the tractor.
So why did I collect 26 historic buildings? Well, I'm a born collector, and as a kid I collected postage stamps. As a teenager I collected antique bottles, tools, and furnishings, and I really wanted someplace to put these, so I built a reproduction 18th century tavern, and it all grew from there. Now I have an amazing 18th century inn, a wonderful 1811 general store. I don't just collect the big buildings, I collect the small ones that go with it. You've never seen anything like an outhouse going down the road on the back of a big truck. You get a lot of funny looks from that. But this great outhouse from down in Castleton, New York, was built about 1805, and inside it's got a plastered vaulted ceiling, it's got paneled wainscoting. The wainscoting is above and below the seats. There are covers on all the three main adult seats. There's even a children's paneled seat over here in the corner, and it has a stationary louvered shutter on the front window. I'll tell you, my students just love using it. My favorite building is this 1836 Greek Revival Church. Now, I've told you something about myself, and you've seen the village. Welcome to Great American Craftsman. I'm Don Carpentier, and we have a lot to cover today, including finishing the woodwork on the sink base in the tavern kitchen. We'll take a look at the furnishings of a typical early 19th century tavern bedroom, and we'll take a close look at a lamp that changed early America. So follow me and let's get started. Now I'd like to show you the operation of an 1840 solar lamp. These were developed in the early 1840s to help save on fuel. Before that, argan lamps were for rich people, and they burned whale oil, which was becoming very scarce by the 1840s and expensive. So they had to come up with a lamp that would burn a cheaper fuel. These were developed just to burn unsalted lard, the type of lard you could get from your pigs in the barnyard. They give you a really, really bright light, and you could actually now stay up in the evenings instead of going to bed as soon as it got dark. You could work on your needlework, you could read the scriptures at that point. So it changed the way that you lived in your house in the 1840s. It changed lighting in America. So now what we have to do is turn up the wick a little bit by turning this outside frame that supports the shade. So now all we have to do is fire it up. Of course, we're using mineral oil today instead of lard, because the lard is a real mess. There, now it's going well enough. They added a chimney to these lamps that helped create a draft, which caused the flame to burn hotter and to consume any smoke so that you didn't have a smelly lamp. It was a very clean burning lamp. Now this is a glass shade that would go over the outside just to be pretty and to help shield your eyes from the light. So why don't we dim the lights so you can really take a look at it. People were very put off by this incredibly bright light coming from these globes because it would seem so bright to them. You'd have a frosted globe that would diffuse the light before it hurt your eyes. We're in the kitchen of the 1793 William Briggs Tavern, which was built in Hoosick, New York. Over here in the corner we have a wonderful 18th century stone sink, and I've already started the base, but I need to make a single thickness plank door to go with it. To start with, we're going to take a piece of rough sawn lumber, the sort of thing that you would have had to have used in the early 19th century because you didn't get planed lumber to start with. You had to do that by yourself. Now you'd start doing that with a smoothing plane made out of wood like this with a steel-faced blade in it. And unfortunately, these are very difficult to adjust, and I like using them, and I have used them, but it's much easier to use a 20th century plane like this, which actually is from the 19th century, but we can buy these today, and anybody can have one of these to use. This has a very fine adjustment in it and allows us to take this board down nice and smooth and with a lot less effort. We're done with this side now. Got all the material off. Now we can start from either end and try to level this board. This is a long jointing plane. It takes the place of a long wooden jointing plane that they would have had in the early 19th century. And like the other metal plane, it has a fine adjustment which allows you to adjust the plane much easier, and it also gives you much more control of the blade and where it actually sits on the board. In order to make this door match the other boards in the cabinet, and so the thickness matches, we break the edge with a bead. And a bead is made with a 19th century beading plane like this that has a shaped blade, exactly the shape that we'd like it to be. And all we do is run from one end of the board to the other, and it slowly cuts its way down. There's a stop built directly into this plane, and when we reach this stop, the plane stops cutting. There, now the bead is done. In order to finish this piece, we've got to take a saw and cut this to length. We can do this with a hand saw, we can do it with a circular saw, we can do it with a radial arm saw. Right now, just because it's convenient, we're going to use a handheld circular saw. And electricity is a great thing. There, now it's done and ready to put in. In order to hang this door, we need to get a pair of the appropriate hinges, and this is my collection of hardware. This has been building for about 35 years now, and in here there should be a pair somewhere of about 1790s HL hinges, or H hinges. That HL is kind of large, and it's also about 1740. I think these H's are a little big, but oh, here's a pair of small H's. These were made probably around 1790, and just what we need for that door. The only thing is we need to make up some small hand-wrought tacks to go in these, because these are surface nailed and they're actually put on with nails. So let's go to the blacksmith shop and see what we can make. Whenever I need to make or repair anything, this is where I head. This is my 1830s brick forge. It's got a beautiful leather bellows. It's leather and wood, actually, with 2 chambers. And the air, when you pump the bellows, the air gets forced through the forge, and it goes through the coal and makes the fire really, really hot. So now I've got to make some new heads on some 19th century nails. I want to turn them into 18th century nails, which requires heating up the heads in the blacksmith shop here in the forge, putting them into a typical 18th century nail header, which this is, and reshaping the nail heads. A rose head nail has 5 flat facets around all the sides and 1 hit at the top, and that's typical of what was used to put these hinges on. Now, in the 19th century and the 18th century, most blacksmiths wouldn't make nails. You'd actually go buy them at the general store, and they were made in England by women, and usually in Birmingham, who worked 12 hours a day doing nothing but making nails, and they were shipped to America cheaper than we could make them here. So I need to make about a dozen of these. I have to rehead about a dozen of these to put the hinges on. And why don't we take a look at one of the finished nails and give you an idea what they look like. Let's see if we can pick one up that's not hot. There we go. You can see it has a really nicely multifaceted head on there. So what we probably ought to do, if I can keep the hot ones away from the cold ones, I'll pick up the cold ones, and we'll walk into the tavern and put the door in place. You can see if the door actually fits. Oh, not bad. Okay, now that we know it fits, I guess it's time to put the hinges on. To do that, we need to take some of our nice hand-wrought nails, and we're going to drive them through, and we have to clinch them from the backside. All right, now we have to hold a block of metal behind the head of each nail, and then you tip the point down and pull it tight together. In order to finish the cabinet now, we'll need to paint the entire base.
And the hinges will be painted out the same color as the base. We won't paint them black to show them off. If they would have painted them out, you wouldn't see them that way, basically. And we'll add a nice brass knob over here and a small wooden turn button to keep this closed. We're in the south bed chamber of the William Briggs Tavern from the late 18th century. It's furnished as it would have been in the early 19th century with a lot of original period furnishings. I've had to acquire these by going to flea markets and tag sales. I've gone through old attics, and I've even had to go to auctions to buy some of these things over the years, but I do find original pieces that way. One of the most important things you'd find in a tavern bedroom, obviously, are the beds. And this is a low post bed, late 18th century one. It's a rope bed, and it has its original red finish on it, and obviously you can see that it has rope springs down here. To keep those rope springs tight, you need a bed wrench like this, which actually slides over the rope and turns to give you some torque so you can tighten them up. And then above the ropes, you'd have a straw tick like this, and on top of that, usually you'd have a feather tick. The rest of the bedding goes on top of that, and you've got to understand that in the 18th century, the bedding was the most expensive thing usually in someone's inventory. Now I want to show you a great Windsor side chair. This is a fan back Windsor. It has a really nice splay to the back, very delicate turnings on here, and it has a really finely detailed leg with a nice medial stretcher on it and a really, really nicely shaped seat. What I really like about this chair, and one of the things that's really important about it, is the fact that it retains its original finish. Finish is everything, especially when we're using it in a historical context like this. You didn't find stripped furniture back then. And not to mention, a piece like this today, if it's stripped, will lose about 2/3 of its value. You always want original finishes. Now let me show you a really great little desk box. It's in the original robin's egg blue paint. I found this at a flea market. The people who had it had found it under the floorboards of their house, and they charged me not a lot of money for it. I bought it about 20 years ago. But it has the original robin's egg blue paint. It's all dovetailed. Inside, it has what's known as minium, or this beautiful orange-colored paint, which was standard for the Hudson Valley Dutch. It has the original drawer in it with lacquer still on the original brass pull. It's in just virtually untouched condition. And what I really like about this piece is on the bottom, Ichabod Marshall's name is here, and it says Schoolmaster Hudson. This is a great piece. It's a wonderful, wonderful object, and it certainly fits into a setting like this. Let's take a look at the Franklin stove that heats the room. This was made in the 18-teens, and it's the sort of thing that was listed in the 1814 inventory of the building, and it's how they would have heated the upstairs chambers. You notice there are no fireplaces in here. I've actually used period right-angle elbows for the stovepipe. They're made out of Russian iron, and there's also a Russian iron heat exchanger at the top that actually made more heat come out of the stove as the gases pass through it. Now, this was one of my favorite little stoves, actually. It's a great thing. I bought it at Brimfield about 20 years ago. It's got hand-wrought penny feet on the bottom, this wonderful pair of miniature andirons so that you can set wood inside here, and it has the maker's name on top. It's Klusman and Thompson from New York City. Now, this is the kind of detail that makes it really important to make a room like this work.